Hey.
Hello.
Hi. I'm Jennifer Vatza, and this is Jasmine Ambrosia. Hello to everyone joining. We're going to be talking a little bit about Jasmine's book, Ambrosia's Book of Witchflight, Traveling the Other World. Great book, by the way. I just read it earlier this year, right after I moved.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I just wanted, I really enjoyed reading this book as someone who creates flying ointments and sort of entheogenic things, and also my own explorations. That I thought it was really like I really loved seeing your stories, your gnosis, your process for doing these things, because a lot of, like, I have my way of using flying ointments and traveling to the other worlds, and the type of work I do through the astral realm and deep meditation, things of that nature. And it's really fascinating for me to see how other people utilize those things, in that, because a lot of times people, especially who are newer, who are coming into witchcraft, don't always know what to do with flying ointments, or they're expecting some type of ayahuasca-like experience, or to be tripping, and that's not always the case. And they're like, but this didn't do anything. I'm like, but did it though?
Right.
So how did you get into the poison? I don't know how much you're into the poison path aspect of it, but obviously enough to have written a book about your gnosis working with that. So I found that kind of fascinating.
I've definitely been growing into the poison path more and more. I've dabbled a lot in writing this book, to the point where, some nights I literally would make myself actually sick trying to push my limit on Datura and Mandrake and Belladonna, because I wanted to find that out for myself, right? What is my limit? So I'm definitely not an expert on the poison path. And that's why if you look at the recipes in the book, there's no measurements, because I know what works for me, but I'm also 6 foot, 250 pounds and stacked.
Same.
So what I can handle, I don't know the next person.
Right.
So I'm
Absolutely.
not at this point in time, I'm interested in Vinicium. I'm interested in the poison path, but I'm not educated enough to be able to actually provide that information, which is why I was super stoked that you were down to do this live with me, because
absolutely. Yeah, it can be, it's a daunting task where you're like, okay, how do I take this poison and not die? So there's a lot that you have to learn. I'm a professionally trained aromatherapist, herbalist. I've taken a bazillion different courses and certifications. I'm also a Reiki master and crystal healer. So I bring all these things into everything I make. And that I have a lot of formal training around that. So I went into the poison path already with a full kind of range of understanding of plant chemistry and how all of that works. And
I went into this blind.
Yeah, it can be. I just finished recording a video with Kobe Michael last night, who's from the Poisoner's Apothecary.
Love Kobe. I actually referenced Kobe's work.
Yes, I saw it. Yeah, in the Poison Path Herbal book, which is really good. And he also does include some formula, more, I think, historically based formulations, because some of what we know of flying ointments come from old grimoires and things like that back, over the history of, European witchcraft. So some of those formulations have been around for a while. So granted, maybe we don't put the raw opium in it anymore, or use, there's some of it, some of the preparations and methods from it came from the, documentation of witchcraft trials. So some of the stuff, you have to take that into account of, the stories of, the witch flight of it, of witches, taking their broom handle, putting the ointment on, and, writing it in a wink, wink, nudge, nudge kind of way versus how they were probably actually using it. So some of that stuff can or has influenced the history of it and what we think about that, what we think of flying ointments in that sense.
Well, I think it's interesting that you talk about witches using the besom to like insert flying ointment, because our oldest like record that at least I know of like a witch on a broom was actually a man. So like people think that like we would put these ointments on besoms and insert them
I don't want splinters there.
in our mucus cauldron of secrets.
Yeah, that's not someplace I want splinters.
No. And
or
also
chemical burns.
Witches flying on brooms originally came from a piece of art where it was actually a magician on a broom. It was a man, not even a woman.
Yes.
So witches flying on implements, like if we look at like so Kelden Mercury did a great book on like the witch's Sabbath, which I have in my reference as well in the book. And like witches would fly on animals or take the form of animals and fly to the Sabbath. But like the whole like witches riding a broom thing, originally it was a man on a broom.
I did not know that. Fun facts. So yeah, it's there's a lot that goes into it. So we have the historical things that come from, you know, whether they're from grimoires or from the tales of witchcraft trials in which you're looking at forced confessions and elaborate things of, oh yes, of course I you know, put the ointment on my besom and, you know, have at it. But, you know, the truth and the reality of it are probably very different. You know, looking at it historically, you know, a lot of it was probably trial and error because, you know, they probably didn't have as much information on the LD50, which is the lethal dose, which is commonly referred to as the lethal dose 50, at which when you look at something in like the nightshades or any of these poison plants, the dosage at which would be lethal to 50% of the population. So as, you know, you mentioned, you know, when it comes to dosing of it, like I always say, start out with a pea size on your wrist and add from there till you find what works for you.
And I definitely did not do that. Like, I very much applied the approach of like stuff around and find out.
We've all been there.
And like, there's journal entries in this book of me being like, so I'm vomiting, like I'm sick.
Yeah, it's, you know, with the flying ointments, like there's a lot of things like I'm a safety nerd, so I have very detailed like list of all the things that, you know, the safety precautions you have to think about when you're using, you know, especially the nightshade stuff, the nightshade ones. I mean, even fly agaric or the Amonita muscaria. Well, you don't want to be allergic to mushrooms and trying something with Amonita muscaria in it, because that would be bad. But
which that is also a spirit in my book.
Yes, I love Amonita muscaria. It's one of my favorite things.
I like had a different sort of experience with them. Like I was like,
yeah, Amonita can be different. It also depends on how you take it, because I have there's some of the non-medical dispensaries have Amonita gummies. They're pretty potent, I gotta tell you. Like, I'm like,
I would love to know what you think of my Spirit Codec page on Amonita.
Let me take a look. Do you happen to know?
It's in the so if you go to the back,
order?
there should be a codex.
Okay.
If you go to the very, very back, there should be a Spirit Codex.
Okay, yes.
Oh, two of my favorite witches. Yeah, this is our first time like collabing.
That's Amarilla. And now I'm going to just keep scanning right past it and sitting here looking for what page it's on. Yep, that seems about it. I like some of the names for the spirits, the Whoopsie Daisy and the Oopsie Daisy. That's one of the things that, oh, there it is, Amonita muscaria 160. One of the things I think sometimes doesn't get emphasized as much because we are serious witches and magicians and sorceresses and stuff like that. Having a sense of humor and laughing your ass off during rituals and coming up with silly things and like finding the humor in it, that is like some of the most purest form of magic right there. So Amonita. I like the fetch, the mushroom terror. Yeah, Amonita can be very intense. Visions, prophecy. Yeah, I would see all of that as part of Amonita and my experiences with it. I mean, I use the Amonita and I do make flying ointments and tinctures with it. I find Amonita muscaria and European Mandrake mix really well together in a flying ointment.
You should totally look at my image of the Mandrake because it's like a little all-around baby.
Yes, I love all the Mandrake. Is that also under the Spirit Codex?
Should be, yeah.
Okay. But yeah, I love all of the lore around Mandrake. I think they're very temperamental to grow, from what I understand. They're the kind of plant you need to sing to. And if you look at it the wrong way, it'll just die on you.
Well, and like American witches and ATW, like the Alaran is something that families would keep for generations and feed it blood. Yeah. Like at every full moon, and it would protect.
Yeah, it was very common to have it on your hearth or on your mantle and stuff. A big, yeah, because Mandrake roots can grow. I mean, you can get really big ones. Granted, you're gonna be paying several $100s for it because European Mandrake is not cheap.
Which doesn't grow well, at least in my growing zone in the state.
It is very temperamental. Yeah, I do like the little guy.
I want to make him into a plushie.
Oh my God, yes.
Wouldn't he be like the best plushie?
Your Datura spirit is like very accurate for Datura.
Datura, out of like the poisonous plants, Datura is like the one that I'm the most close to.
See, for me, it's Belladonna. Like Datura to me is just a little harsh.
And I love that.
Yeah, so when I make things with Datura in it, I often will blend it with other things to kind of level it out a little bit because I just find it really. It's not that I don't like it or have a bad experience on it.
No, but Datura is like the harsh uncle.
Yeah,
like, and I feel like Belladonna.
If you need some brutal truths released upon you, Datura will do it.
And we use Belladonna in our coven for like abyss walking and like. Having like almost like psychic visions and like we do a whole ritual every year with Datura. And like Belladonna is like she's deadly, but she's like your auntie. You know, she's more feminine,
like more nurturing. Like for me, my first experience with Belladonna, it's like how people talk about soulmates and all these different things. I'm like, no, Belladonna's like my soul plant. It's like it was just like there's something about it that resonated with me on such a deep level, more so than any other plant I've come across.
I think most witches like Belladonna because she is like the mother of witches in the plant world.
Yeah, it's always funny in my previous incarnations of the random things I did, like back in the day. I mean, this was like probably 20 years ago. Actually, well, it was 20 years ago already. Jesus Christ. But I was really big into Second Life, which was like a virtual worlds platform.
I'm familiar.
Yeah, so I used to do like avatar design and would like design like the clothing that people's avatars would wear. And my brand that I had in there was called Deadly Nightshade, which I thought was really like looking back, I'm like, I wonder why. I there's something about it that I was always drawn to, and I just never really understood why. But yeah, like when it comes, I think we were talking a little bit about like when it comes to like the dosage and stuff, because I'm tall and big. I'm like 5'9", just lost some
5'9" is short.
Yeah. I mean, well, if I put heels on, I'm way over 6 feet tall. But yeah, it's
5'9" though to me is like short. Like I'm 6 foot flat-footed.
Yeah.
And I'm a big woman. Like I'm 250 pounds.
Yeah. I'm big too.
Which like 15 of that is silicone. But she big. She real big. So that's why I didn't add like measurements, because I was like, I'm not even gonna do that. Because
Yeah,
like what
you really
I
need
can
to find
handle.
what works for you, because I mean your anatomy and physiology does play a heavy role in it. So
And
like
I'm
what I
also
like.
I'm not an herbalist.
Mm-hmm,
I'm not a medical professional.
mm-hmm,
I'm not anyone even trained in Reiki
mm-hmm.
either. Like I'm just a hood witch, basically, who figured this shit out on her own.
Hey, there's nothing wrong in doing that. Like, 'cause a lot of things I figured, you know, like I have the formal training, but I also kind of figure, like, sometimes you get the formal training, so you kind of have your little like credential thing, but like a lot of times I went into these things, I'm like, I already know all this, so I'm just kind of getting like fine tuning things a little bit. But yeah, like part of the reason I don't, and I agree with you on the dosing part, is that it is going to change. It's going to vary wildly, and there's going to be external factors which I am not going to be able to um predict for you, like your metabolism. Now for me, I know from having genetic testing done for this, because I had so many issues with medications in my life, I managed to be a poor metabolizer and an ultra rapid metabolizer, and it's anyone's guess as to which medications are going to hit either one of those things. So for the poor metabolism side, what that means for me is if I take the lowest dose of something regularly, it's going to start stacking on top of each other because it doesn't flush out of my system fast enough. So that 2 milligram dose over the course of a month will become a 100 milligram dose. So for me, when something goes into the poor metabolic processing, I need much less of it, and it's going to stack in my system more. Now, for the ultra rapid metabolizing part of it, things are in and out of my system so fast sometimes. So certain things, I can take enough benzos or like Valium to put someone else in the hospital, and I'm just fine, because it's just my system processes it out much faster. So, and the same thing with like alcohol. So certain things are going to hit my system much differently. And some things might be in and out really fast, and sometimes I might have a very long exposure, like a longer experience with it. And other things that can play into it, like I'm on the spectrum, autistic, ADHD, and different medications, especially when you have sensory processing issues, and any of those will hit you differently. Back in my wilder young days of experimenting in not so great illegal things, like MDMA, that triggered, like I didn't realize it because I wasn't diagnosed at the time and had no idea. That triggered the worst sensory processing nightmare world that you could imagine. I know a lot of people love that, and it's being used a lot more for like psychedelic, medicine therapies and stuff. But like for me, with the sensory processing, that's when I just have to be like, not for me. Or any kind of stimulants, a lot of times because of the ADHD, would be like, do a line of something and be like, well, I need a sandwich and a nap now. And people are like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, I need a sandwich and a nap. Because those stimulants were making me normal, putting me at my baseline where everyone else was all up here. I'm like, I would like a nap and a sandwich. So some of these things, there's so many things you have to take into consideration with this, and that it's not going to work for everyone. Like certain medications, like even over-the-counter stuff. Like if I have a headache, I'm going to take a leave. Or if I'm having physical pain, because I do have some chronic pain issues, ibuprofen does nothing for me. Even the 800 milligram ibuprofen does nothing. Aleve does better. So sometimes it's knowing your body, knowing how your body chemistry works. And if you have any underlying health issues, that's going to play into it as well. So, some of the stuff, obviously you don't want to be using the toxic flying ointments and stuff like that if you are pregnant and nursing. The basic things apply, like not using, heavy machinery or driving and stuff like that. But some of the things that you don't think about, and I will tell you a cautionary tale from this, is the big one with the nightshades is you don't want to use those things if you're on any type of anti-cholinergic medicines, and especially if you are going to be having surgery, because what the chemicals that are in those, like scopolamine, atropine, a lot of those are administered in anesthesia. So if you already have it in your system, it can mess that up if you're having surgery or something like that. So those are things to take into consideration there. And people have allergies to things like, if you're allergic to like aspirin, like the salicylate that's in aspirin, or ragweed, which is interesting because I think I'm actually allergic to ragweed. You might have an allergic reaction to the nightshades as a result. And certain ones, same with mugwort and wormwood, or if you're allergic to other plants in that particular botanical family, which is the Asteraceae family. So, and with mugwort and wormwood specifically, if you have any seizure disorders or epilepsy or stuff like that, you wouldn't want that. Could contraindicate, that could cause issues there.
Found that out the hard way.
Yeah, I found out the anesthesia part the hard way because I do ketamine treatments for treatment-resistant depression. Now, this is where, and it was such I like to tell the story as a cautionary tale, because with the place I do, because I do all my ketamine treatments at home. So, like, I have a ketamine guide. I have a clinician that I work with there, and I had this really extreme. I'd already done like 6 or 7 or maybe even 8 ketamine treatments up to this point, no issues. And suddenly this one, like, I got that. If you've ever had surgery, that feeling right before you lose consciousness when the anesthesia punches you in the face. I was just stuck in that like rolling feeling. And I'm like, something is different. Something happened. Something's wrong here. Like it was very, it was very short-lived and in and out of my system much faster than a normal ketamine treatment. I was like, what the fuck was that? Because it's like, I'm like, if I'm here, I'm like, if this is going to have anesthesia effects, I don't want to like be here and forget how to breathe. Thankfully, I have a CPAP machine because I have sleep apnea, so I put that on just as a countermeasure. But as I was talking to the clinician, I hadn't thought anything of it. I was talking to him the day or two after, and I was like, well, I had this weird reaction. I have no idea why. And he happened to remember and looked in the notes that he's like, yeah, you're an herbalist. Did you come into any contact with any herbs or anything out of the usual that day? And I'm looking at my log from that day, and he just saw the expression on my face change because I was just like, I should know better. This was a day I spent making flying ointments, grinding up all the fancy nightshades and agarics for herbal smoke blends. So I was inhaling the particulate. I'm like, well, I touched all the nightshades and the fly agarics because I was making things all day. So he's like, yeah, maybe do your ketamine treatments on days you're making soap. So cautionary tale, that is why you don't want to, because ketamine is used in anesthesia, so you want to have the beneficial, psychedelic healing experience of ketamine, not, oh my God, I'm going to forget how to breathe because I'm now under anesthesia ketamine. So cautionary tales. So I was going to see, look at the comments a little bit, see if there's any questions or anything. That's true, Eddie. You can be allergic to some parts of the plants, but not the whole plant. Like you can be allergic to pollens, or maybe you're allergic to the leaves, or maybe you're allergic to, the leaves, but not the flowers. Like I realized over the course of the past year, I developed a sensitivity to mullen, which is used in so many witchcraft things. Like as soon as I touched it, I would just be like getting like the red kind of flesh, and my skin was itchy. And yeah, I'm like, all right, well, we're just going to not put mullen in things anymore. But yeah, with flying ointments, there are things that you can, you can combine them with, if you have any smoke blends, any tinctures and stuff like that as well, or gummies of varieties in which you have to go to special stores to buy them.
I would love to know what you thought of my Datura nasal inhalant recipe.
Okay. I haven't tried it, but that does sound fascinating. I am notorious for reading books and going, oh, I'm going to try that and do that later, and then but I at least can blame my ADHD on a lot of things. Is that in the back of the book?
Should be under recipes.
Yeah, with Datura, like there is even like little differences between I switch between Datura anoxia and Datura stramonium a lot. Datura stramonium is very smelly. I think it's nicknamed Stinking White Nightshade or something like that.
I love that.
Here it is.
Also, like I love stinky herbs. Like I love valerian. Like people are like, oh, valerian smells like feet. And I'm like, I love her. She relaxes like my anxiety.
Yeah, valerian's great for that. I mean, if you think the herb is smelly, try the essential oil. It's concentrated smelly. So way more smelly. The
also, if you think
really
it's
as bad as the
it's probably
oil.
good medicine.
It is, yeah.
Is what I've learned.
Yeah.
So this recipe is very controversial, Jen.
Mm-hmm.
Because people are like, oh my God, like, how dare you publish this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I mean, I use it. I don't list the dose.
Right.
But I'm not dead.
Yes. Do you use the leaf, flower, or seeds in the mixture? The seeds. Okay. I think I would probably have to do stramonium because I think that's the one I have that has the seed pods with it. I'm not good at growing things, so I rely on other people for that. And I do have suppliers for various things. Although I might need to get a new Detura stramonium supplier. I'm trying to remember. I feel like the last time I got it came from someone in Russia. So that's not going to happen right now. Because you can't really get much out of Russia and Ukraine at this point in time. Or two there. I'll have to try that sometime. So you don't smoke it, you just burn it like in the cauldron. I think I had a henbane one that from the Poisoner's Apothecary, like an incense that was made from henbane.
Well, and like we typically will like burn it in a cauldron, right? And like keep the lid on it, and then like we'll crack the lid of the cauldron, and then we'll like plug one nostril, and then like
I will have to try that. I will have to try that. Yeah. I mean, especially with the devil's lettuce, mugwort, and datura, you're gonna have some crazy dreams and a really good experience with on the mental plane. Because we were talking a little bit before we started, like some of it is like dealing with the misconceptions of like what I talked about. Like people are always like expecting like if they get a flying ointment, they're gonna be tripping balls or having like an ayahuasca experience. I'm like, it's not like that. It's got effects. It's got psychoactive effects. Now, legalities being what they are, and it does vary from country to country. Now, none of these are illegal per se in the United States, but you will run into issues where a lot of platforms and payment processors make up their own damn rules, and they're very conservative. Because I've had so many issues with that. Like I don't even bother with Amazon because I could not convince them at one point in time that a perfume containing opium fragrance oil did not contain heroin. So I didn't even bother trying because a lot of them have regulations for toxic plants. And what happens there too is some things, it's just like they make these across the board things. So Datura stramonium you'll run into sometimes as being, it's the noxious weed classification. So a lot of places where it's illegal because it's a noxious weed. So it's not, but I'm
Well,
like,
it's also very invasive,
that's
right?
why. Like, if they're invasive species or they're a noxious weed, a lot of times they're gonna have legislation around that. And I'm like,
And I love that
you
about
can't grow
him.
anything out of a tin of flying ointment that contains Datura, but it still gets kind of thrown into that same classification.
But that's kind of what I love about Datura is that he's so aggressive. Like, I appreciate that. And I hope that that transfers in my graphic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes you need that. Like, if you're, because we can all at some points in time be our own worst enemies in our practice, in our growth, in our lives, in our spirituality. Sometimes you need a plant like Datura to just kind of grab you and go, "Pow, pow, pow. Pay attention." Whereas other ones will be like, come, softer, give you a big hug. No,
And
sometimes you need
Datura is not.
yeah,
For those of you who might be watching, like, if you're looking for a softer poisonous plant, honestly, I would go with Belladonna.
mm-hmm.
Because, like, Mandrake made me sick.
Really?
I made a Mandrake tea, which really upset my stomach.
Did you use American Mandrake or European Mandrake?
European.
Really? Because the American Mandrake, which isn't even a true Mandrake, it's like podophyllum something. And it's called American Mandrake. A lot of places sell it as Mandrake Root, but it's not even in the same Mandrake family. And that one is a violent purgative. Like, you want to spend, a day in the bathroom. That's what the American Mandrake is for. But like a European Mandrake, which is Mandragora officinalis or Mandragora autumnalis, those are the ones that are traditionally used in the flying ointments. It's just like it irks me that a lot of places, especially metaphysical stores, sell Mandrake Root, and you're thinking you're buying,
but they sell Mandrake Root.
Yes. And a lot of times it's not actually Mandrake Root. It's the American Mandrake Root. Because I almost made that mistake too. So I almost made that mistake early on. I'm like, well, it's Mandrake Root. No, it's not. But yeah, I haven't had any issues with it, but again, going back to everyone has a different metabolism, body constituency. There's, if you're on other medications that can, affect it as well, and your experience with it, like a common one with like SSRI antidepressants.
I was going to say, especially if you're on like antidepressants or blood pressure medications, and like I have high blood pressure. And I think that would be the thing that you have to be like the most careful about, is that some of these, like Foxglove, can like lower or higher, right, your blood pressure depending on like how you're using it, right?
Well, Foxglove, I mean, what the danger of Foxglove is that what the digitalis purpura is the botanical, is the, what's the word, Latin name, or botanical name for it. But what we get out of the plant chemicals is digoxin, which is something that is used as a cardiac medication. Now, digoxin can save your life if you have the cardiac issue that it treats. If you don't have the cardiac issue it treats, you can end up very not alive anymore.
Isn't there also like the type of foxglove that like causes like rashes? Like it's like poisonous and like causes the rashes? Or am I thinking of like a different plant?
There's a lot that can cause, I mean, really anything can cause a rash if you're allergic to it, but I'm trying to think I don't work with Foxglove that much. Like I have some like flower essence of that's Foxglove. I had a Foxglove once, and then I killed it because I'm stuck at growing plants. But yeah, I'm trying to remember. It's either that one or Wolfsbane aconite. Like some of these, and it also depends on how you use them versus like aconite is toxic to the point where inhaling it can, cause deadly reactions, or just touching it. So like some of them you have to be really careful with. Like I always talk about, like I've out of everything, I'm the most like apprehensive about aconite, because you'll read stories like farmer brushes past some aconite on his farm and dies.
Of course. Yeah. Well,
because they
and some
can
people
do
have
that.
even been upset about me including the nasal inhalant for
Mhm.
Datura. People are like, this is irresponsible. This recipe could kill people. And I'm like, I provide an alternative. Like,
Mhm. Yeah, it's
also, I
honestly,
have
I
a
mean,
legal disclaimer in the book
yeah,
that, like, I'm not responsible
yeah.
for,
I mean,
like,
out of all of sort of the poison path kind of things, Datura, I think, is like probably the most notorious out of it because there are so many Datura trip report videos on YouTube of people like taking a handful of seeds and losing their freaking mind.
yeah, but that's also, like, probably my favorite. Like, he is the uncle of
Yes.
witches, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways that you can take things and depending upon your experience. Now, would I go into doing Datura by eating a handful of seeds if I've never done Datura before and never done this just for the wow
No.
experience? But no, I probably wouldn't. But that's what where a lot of these bad trip reports come from is people fucking around
You're
and
not
finding out.
supposed to, like, ingest Datura. That's why we do, like, the nasal
Yeah,
inhalant.
I
Like,
mean, I use it in tinctures and stuff, but again, it's such a small, almost not maybe not homeopathic amount, but when you're especially when you're creating something to be ingested like that, you really need to know the dosages for it and your LD50 of okay, this is right here where we need to be. Anything more is gonna be not so great actually. So it's I mean, with any of them, and sometimes the different plant parts are more like belladonna berries are the most toxic part of the plant. A few berries could kill a person or a small child.
I think of, like, this incantation, which comes from actually a skipping rhyme.
Hmm,
And maybe you know it, maybe you don't, but it's something like, I've got a deadly nightshade, so twisted does it grow, with berries black as midnight and a skull as white as snow. The Vica's cocky young boy came to drink my tea. He touched me without asking, now he's buried neath the tree.
hmm. I don't know if I've heard that one, but I like it.
It's about basically, like, poisoning the priest's son
Hmm,
with
interesting.
belladonna
Huh. Yeah,
if
some of
he
those
touches
those
you. If
those
he touches
rhymes.
you unconsensually.
Yeah. Yeah, some of those rhymes, like and stories, I'm like, they're grim. Like Ring Around the Rosie. Most people don't realize that's about the bubonic plague. Because
Ring
it's like
around the rosy, a pocket full of posy.
yeah, the ring around the rosy was like with the buboes, like describe a pocket full of posies. A lot of times they would carry, flour to cover up the stench, and because at the time, they didn't have the medical advancements to really understand how that particular disease was being transmitted. So
And then ashes, ashes, we all
we all
fall
fall
down
down.
because they burn the bodies.
Yes. So very some of these things like you don't think about it as a child, but yeah, I mean, and the nightshades in general are going back to your Datura, the nasal inhalant thing. A lot of they're perfectly fine to mix with alcohol and THC cannabis products and
See,
stuff.
but, like, I have herbalists and, like, witches on TikTok being like, you're putting people's lives in danger. And I'm like, I put a disclaimer at the front of
Yes,
the recipe chapter, though.
and I'm always like, by the way, you can die from drinking too much water. It's true. Like a lot of these things, it's about the balance and the correct application of it. You can die from too much water or not enough water. You want to keep that balance. It's not to say, oh my God, water's deadly. Let's never drink water again. Well, our bodies are mostly made up of water. So, but yes, a lot of times people like anything can have like in excess can be toxic and can kill you.
Also, again, at the front of the recipe chapter, there is a legal disclaimer
Right.
that I am not responsible, nor am I a doctor, an herbalist, an energy worker. Like, girl, I'm a witch who learned this shit the hard way. And here's what works for me. And here's my book. Do with that as thou will.
What inspired you to write the book and to kind of share your experiences sort of to a broader?
So there's a chapter in the book called The Owl Woman. I don't know if you've read it or not, but our coven every year at Witch's Night or Winter's Peak or Samhain, we do a ritual where we conjure the witch's devil.
Yes, I remember reading
and we receive a familiar. And I got the owl. And I wasn't like super into it. I was like, I love Lilith. I'm into it. Like, maybe I'm going to get like a Lalitu as like my spirit for the year. Because like this familiar spirit is a spirit that's supposed to guide you in your work for the coming witch's year. So like from Samhain to Samhain, you work with the spirit to bring you prosperity, strength, glory, and honor. And like, I'm a priestess of Lilith. So I was thinking at first, right, it would be connected with that. But I wrote about it in the book and like, I called out to Lilith and like, she did not come to me. And I was like, kind of sad because I was like, well, damn, like I was assigned the owl. So then I'm like, is it Stolas? But Stolas and I have had like a weird relationship back and forth. And so eventually Vittoria Maria is who came forth, who's like this anthropomorphic owl spirit, like almost like a striga.
Yeah.
But also like there's a Marchusias or Lachusias, I think, in the Hispanic witches. Like Italian and Hispanic witches both have like these owl witches.
Okay.
And that's what she was like. And she basically was like, so if you want this thing, you're gonna write this book. And I'm like, I'm not an author. I've never even written a book. Also, like, I have a 10th grade education. Like, I'm hardly literate. Like,
yeah.
That was super weird for me. Cause like I'm not like academic. Like I'm a witch. I'm a high priestess, like in our tradition. But that doesn't make me like an author. And I've never written a book before. So I was like really like nervous about like self-publishing.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of imposter syndrome and also a lot
That's a real
of
thing.
Yeah. And a lot of also too, like knowing that like other witches would like rip my work apart, which they have, right? About like the Datura nasal inhalant being like, you're endangering.
Here's a hidden thing. If you don't want to do Datura and are worried about it, don't do Datura.
Exactly.
People spend a lot of time, like, you know, and I've run into this in different communities. It's not just the witchcraft community or any faction with it. People love to tell you you're doing it wrong, but never give you any insights to how to do it right or or will do it themselves. You know, it's easy to like armchair quarterback, you know, whatever someone else is doing. Oh, you're doing this wrong, blah, 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 blah. And then not offer any kind of insight as to how, you know, how can I make this better for you? That you just run into that a lot. And it's some of it's human nature. People just like to tear each other down for BS reasons, but you know, I didn't read anything in this book that made me go, oh.
So this book was basically a pact with a spirit.
Yeah.
That's why it exists. Because I'm not an author. I mean, I am now,
spirits
I
like to give a
guess.
lot of homework and challenges.
And so I made the book, and
Mhm.
honey, she delivered.
Nice.
Okay. Vittoria Maria, she is a very strong, she is very Queen of Swords, but like she delivered on her promise.
Mhm.
And like part of my pact with her was like writing this book.
Yeah.
So that's how this book came to be. It was actually in the working since like October 31st of like
Mhm.
2022. And then it was
Hmm.
like published August 4th of
Hmm.
2023.
Oh wow. Yeah, I mean, like one of the things I really liked about it is that you're working with all different types of spirits, not just the standard issue like, left hand path spirits or the goetic spirits or the dark goddesses. That you have spirits in there that maybe I've never heard of that might be unique to your experience, and I think that's really great because we don't see that as much. People tend to talk about, I work with Lilith, I work with Lucifer, I work with this, the Goetia or any or these dark goddesses, and there are so many other spirits out there other than the name brand spirits, as it
Well, and I
were.
think some of the spirits in the codex, like Kara Lorne, is
Mm,
very like Hecatean. Like
mm,
Terra Nor is very Hecatean. Vex is very like Lilith.
mm.
Amarilla Aura is giving like a little bit of like Paris Hilton meets Yemaya.
Who just Hilda Swamp Titties reminds me. She remind me of what was that model actress? She died. Anna Nicole Smith.
Oh,
She kind of reminds me of her a little bit.
love her.
Yeah. But yeah, sometimes when we do these spirit explorations that, it is interesting to really go in and,
And see, people in the chat are talking about Reddit. People on Reddit are tearing my codex apart because they're like, I can't find any information about these spirits. So she made this up. And I'm
I'm
like,
like,
okay, look
didn't
at the
I
back
just
of
say that in the book?
right. Like, look at the book. I told you it was a work of UPG.
Yes. Yeah, it's
And also, I think that we need more of that. Like,
yeah.
can we stop recommending Scott Cunningham and Silver Ravenwolf?
Yes. Scott
Please,
Cunningham was great on the Wicca path, but when it comes like
for
I
his
find
time.
yes,
We
I
need
find though
more witches.
like a lot of the books that he had that are about herbs and essential oils and correspondences, some of that information now is inaccurate. He died over 30 years ago or almost 30 years ago at this point. So
Well, and also
in the
we
early
need
like there's things in
witches.
there he talks about being toxic and you should never use like basil essential oil. Well, yes, there are there can be toxic chemicals that are in things, but there's also with basil essential oil, and not to nerd out too much, there's different chemotypes of it. So it depends, like if it's basil that's high in linalool, that's probably fine versus ones that are high in like methyl eugenol or something that has more bodily toxins to them, because some are
Okay,
more
but also, Jen, like we need witches in the modern era writing books with their own UPG right now
oh,
to
I
like
absolutely.
forward the craft.
Yes. Yeah. And, sometimes you can have, you have your UPG that is UPG until you verify it. I had an experience with that, just that I'm like, I think this might be verified personal gnosis now. But like
Well, and I've had witches be like, I've been to Asalia, or I've
Mhm,
been to the Hollowed Woods, or I've
mhm,
been to Grydell. Like I recognize these realms, or
mhm.
even like spirits. And that makes it like shared personal gnosis.
Yes.
But nowhere in the book do I lead anyone on to believe this
No,
anything other than my own UPG. It's in the
exactly.
summary. It's in the summary.
Yes. Yeah, so like recently I had this one because I don't even remember what I was doing, but King Paimon popped up and he was talking about the importance of working with and creating your own personal pantheons. What I found was fascinating about that, like not only looking at your work here, but I had just been reading, I believe it was the complete book of demonology by S. Conley, and there's a chapter in there very early called personal pantheons, working, and all about. I'm like, interesting. She didn't mention Paimon, but I was like, she was talking exactly about what he was telling me. Developing your personal Paimons. We work personal Paimons. Hi, King Paimon. We all need a personal Paimon. That when we look at our pantheons with what we work with, do we need to, I'm a Goetia, I work with the Goetia and that hierarchy. I work with the dark goddesses, or I work the Celtic or the Norse, or
okay, but let's go back to the Goetia.
Yes. So the Goetia, yeah.
So the Goetia, who made the Goetia the Goetia?
Yeah, I mean, all of that is probably unverified personal gnosis.
Thank you.
All of them, everything at some point in time was unverified personal
gnosis. Yes.
And there's things, and what's interesting where it's good to have people to talk to and bounce things off of, because sometimes, especially, I came into working with spirits from having been a very pragmatic, hardcore atheist agnostic for decades. So it was a horse of a very different color to start working with spirits again. So a lot of times I was bouncing things off other people. I'm like, hey, this happened with this spirit and stuff. Is this? I'm like, oh yeah, that's a common thing that, a lot of people experience with this. So to have people to talk to and be like, yeah, that sounds exactly like the way, Lucifer works with people, or Belial, or anyone. So it's like, sometimes you get little micro verifications, maybe. So, it's like, that might not be published in a book anywhere, but like talking to other people, generally speaking, people who are actually working with Belial have very similar experiences, and you can recognize that energy signature. And what I found fascinating about the book was that, you're working with all these different spirits that aren't in all those old, grimoires, aren't the standard issue spirits that people work with. Now, when I first started out doing a lot of my own explorations in witchflight and astral travel and, deep meditation and channeling and all that, I started out working with Lilith and Lucifer and kind of just added on, from there. And but I kind of was intentionally, working with those, using sort of the entheogenic gateway to connect with those spirits, because someone who, being that I'm ADHD and on the spectrum, like sitting down and meditating for me just does not happen easily. Like I have to be in the right brainwave state, and then also not too blotto that I just fall asleep, or too blotto that I can't write anything down, and I'm like, I'll remember this in the morning. Oh, no, you won't. You think you will, but you won't, because you just forgot what you were talking about while you were talking about it. So I'm like, damn it. But for me, for beginners, I found like the flying ointments to be a really good way to kind of facilitate working with spirits. And, you can use it to connect with, and not just, goddesses, any deities and stuff like that. You can use that to connect with your spirit guides and power animals and ancestors and things like that if it doesn't come naturally to you. And then after a while, you'll just kind of start seeing how those things develop over time, where it's like I could barely meditate for 5 minutes when I started out by using like the flying ointments, and going, like, there's times I was gone for 3 hours and it felt like 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think too, like mirror jumping and shape shifting and working with like your fetch.
Yes.
Is very important.
Absolutely. So for you, like I had not been really overly familiar with the term fetch in depth. Is that kind of the same as, is that, what's the word I'm looking, not, is that similar to a familiar, or?
No, I would not say it's like a familiar, because like a familiar is like a familiar spirit.
Yeah. What's the word I'm looking for?
So this is just the way that we see it in ATW. Okay.
It might just be I have a different term for it, you know?
Yeah. And like everyone else's mileage may vary, right?
Mhm.
But like we believe in like the three soul paradigm. So you have like your white soul, your red soul, your
Yeah.
black soul. The
Yeah.
white soul being like your star soul,
Mhm.
your red soul being like your blood soul, and your black
Mhm.
soul being like your earthly soul. So every witch's black soul has an animal form that we
Hmm.
use to like shapeshift into to travel the other world.
Gotcha. Yes. That makes sense. Like kind of describing that because sometimes there's terms that get used interchangeably, but they're not really interchangeable. So like I'm glad that you clarified that for me because I was kind of thinking of it. I'm like, is this like a familiar or servitor kind of thing? But I
So
knew it wasn't
like
quite
my
that.
fetch that I talk about in the book, like that's me. That's not a
Mhm.
familiar. A familiar
Gotcha.
spirit would be like a spirit that is outside of you that you're
Mhm.
working with.
Okay.
A
Yeah, that makes
fetch
sense.
is a part of you.
Okay. Yeah, I do like the three soul kind of concept as well. That was something that really kind of vibed for me on that. We talked a little bit about shape shifting as we were kind of getting ready for the stream. We were chit chatting about it a little bit as something I wanted to explore more because it's not an area that I know of. And one of the things we all kind of run into as content creators, business owners, authors, occultists, etc., we get some interesting requests that are not entirely based in reality. I'm
Yeah.
not entirely sure I can create a potion that's going to turn you into a zombie mermaid werewolf because I don't think that's a thing that literally exists. So it's like sometimes I think there's a disconnect with people. And I was talking this on another podcast where people think of things in very literal terms when they're more metaphorical, symbolic, figurative.
And
So,
spiritual.
and
Like
spiritual.
in my shape shifting ritual, like if you look at it in the book,
Yeah, yeah.
it literally talks about like pulling your black soul
That
from your
essence and kind of
stomach
projecting it
and
out. It's
having it
not that I'm,
come out of your mouth.
yeah, I'm not turning literally into a serpent. Not like all this. I mean, I've had times when I've been in travel where things have kind of. There was one time I was speaking of serpents where I remember, I forget, I think I might have been working with Belial, but it's like I was deep in state and I kind of rose up in bed and like she made this weird like snake hissing sound. Because it's like, I was kind of embodying the serpent at that point in time. But was I literally a snake? No. So it's like sometimes there's that sense because I've shapeshifted, many times on, while in Witchflight and the astral realm and stuff like that. It's not that hard to do. It's not something I would need a potion for necessarily specific for, transforming into
Well, no,
an
I think it's more of
owl
like a
or
visualization.
yeah. It's again not literal. So yeah, that's something I found because I was doing a lot of research on shapeshifting. I happened to watch a longer video on it, which I found really helpful. I'm like, okay, so I'm on the right page here. I didn't just miss a memo that I could
Oh
throw
yeah, you're
words in
talking
a
about like
jar
my
and turn
shape
you into a
shifting video
werewolf.
where I talk about like shaping into a serpent. Like
Mhm. Yeah, because there's a lot of lore that comes from different
so much lore. I mean,
times,
there's
different
like Irish
cultures.
and British witches taking on the form of like a hare or a
Mhm.
rabbit. There's Middle Eastern lore about taking on the form of a jackal or a
Mhm.
serpent. Like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's something that I find like I'm always talking about, especially on my channel. I'm like thinking critically. And sometimes, I mean, there are people who do publish and write and make videos that are just absolute garbage sometimes. It's calling it what it is that, it's there's a point in which we accept a lot in the terms of unverified personal gnosis as that is your experience. That is very real to you. When you're like, all these people are working with the same spirit, and then this person's working with that spirit, and this spirit's telling them to go out and unalive everyone. We're like, maybe you're the one that wants to unalive people, not the spirit. You're just using the devil made me do it argument there. So I see a lot of that from certain factions within the left-hand path.
And that's why I try to stay away from the left-hand path to a degree. Like, I am a trad witch. I'm an American traditional trad witch.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a HP and SCC, and I stay in my lane because the left-hand path, what it's become, I don't want to be a part of it.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should. You know, it's we've talked about this other people too, like the animal sacrifice topic with it. I'm like, I work with a lot of spirits. No one has ever asked me to lop the heads off chickens.
Well, and also, like, when it comes to animal sacrifice, like, I mean, I cook my own food.
Right.
So, like, are there times where I would pray over an animal and
absolutely
prepare it for dinner? Yeah. To me, that's not left-hand path, though. That's just cultural.
Right.
Like, on the 4th of July, our family has, like, a fucking goat roast. And, like, the goat is slaughtered and cooked in the ground.
And there are a lot of cultural traditions where that is just something that plays into it. It just gets really excessive in some of the left-hand path.
Yeah, it's not killing animals cruelly.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And it's not doing it for no reason. Like, we're gonna slaughter this animal to feed our family, and we're gonna pray over it and give it to gods and consume it. Like, it's a sacred thing.
Yeah,
like animal sacrifice, I think, becomes like a really weird topic.
It does.
For witches. And I think that especially, and forgive me, but I think that like more like white American witches sometimes get like spicy about it without realizing that there's cultural nuance. And like, okay, so you can buy chicken nuggets at the store.
Yeah, that's where I get like, I'm
totally fine. But like, if you slaughter the chicken yourself.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of like, for me, the way I look at it, like, I'm always kind of wrestling with I just picked up a Big Mac from McDonald's. How against animal sacrifice can I be? Because I know factory farming is absolutely horrific. And I
agree. And I think the difference comes into cruelty, right?
Yeah.
Like,
so
if you're torturing an animal, that's wrong.
Yeah, I think it comes down to there's a time and place for everything and finding the balance in that. Does every single ritual you do need to be a sacrificial rite?
No.
Probably not. But, you know, everyone has different relationships with their spirits. I mean, I personally don't feel comfortable doing any kind of sacrifice. So that's not going to be part of my practice. I mean, I understand the cultural implications of things. And, you know, my thoughts are my thoughts on it. But, you know, I think sometimes things change and adapt. I mean, we're not, like I say this kind of in context with it, that we're not throwing virgins into volcanoes anymore to appease the gods. So that's probably a good thing.
Also, like, most modern day devotees of Hecate are not sacrificing black dogs.
Right.
So I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So sometimes there's things that you just kind of have to look at them through different lenses and from different perspectives, and being able to think critically about something. And here's the great thing, and people don't seem to understand this: you can have very conflicting opinions that are very opposite about the same thing, and they're all valid.
Yeah.
You know, it's not that it's this or that and that's it. That's your only choice in the matter. Is that there are things that are like big topics like that there's different ways to look at it. And, you know, I'm thankful. I mean, you were talking, like, I come from an academic background, so I'm a research nerd and stuff like that. Like, I did my undergraduate degree in art history and studio art. My thesis was looking at a particular artist. She was a Iranian exile. She left Iran around the time of the revolution in 1979, but she did a lot of really challenging it was a particular series called The Women of Allah, which was a series all of Muslim women in their, you know, in Iran, they wear the chador and the black kind of, I think they wear, depending on what's going on in the country, because that does change depending on who's in control. But, you know, at the time that she did this, and all of them had, you know, so there were the women in, you know, the traditional Muslim dressings, and in a lot of cases, like sometimes they had firearms with them, and then all of them had these beautifully in the Persian script. Some of them were poems from Farrukh Farazad, but the thing I really looked at in this was the concept of veiling from the East and West perspective, because we look at that and see oppression first. These poor women, they're being oppressed, they're that. But then look at veiling in the Western world, the Virgin Mary, the bride, the girl getting, you know, communion and I don't know, whatever, Christianity and stuff like that. So we have a very different, that's all positive veiling. We don't look at that and go, oh, those poor oppressed brides having to wear a veil and stuff. But, you know, it's so being able to look at the semiotics of it and the signs and signifiers at how we look at something from different perspectives. Like we can't see it from the Eastern perspective because that's not our cultural heritage, upbringing, or, you know, frame of reference. So we're always going to see it from that different from, you know, the Western worldview. So I think being able to look at things critically like that and be like, hey, you can think two entirely different things that are opposing about the same thing, and they're both valid. So that's kind of how I look at the animal sacrifice thing. I have my about it, but I also kind of can rationally look at it from different.
I mean, yeah, if you're getting a McDouble from McDonald's.
Yeah. Is it even meat? But yeah.
So I am going to put on this banner because I have to go pee.
Good, all right.
Do you have to go pee?
I probably always have to pee, so.
Okay, I'm going to put on this banner for this.
We'll be right back.
We will be right back. Hold, please. Okay, we'll be right back.
Perfect.
And we're back. Oh, hold on. There we go. We're back.
We go. Yay!
So animal sacrifice.
Yeah. Or just the nuance of things and morals. Really being able to think critically and look beyond what you think of something to kind of understand the broader issue, perspectives of it. And and there are, in any situation, like I like to learn as many perspectives on things as I can, because that helps me understand it better. Because honestly, it's like sometimes being on the spectrum, like I just will be like, I didn't get that file on how to be human. I don't understand this. It's just like, I completely forgot what I was going to say because my brain does that sometimes.
I mean, it'd be like that sometimes.
It'd be like that, yes. And also, I think my little tiara thing is trying to squish my brain out.
So, what did you think of the book?
I really enjoyed it. I mean, honestly, for me, I do like the unverified personal gnosis of it all. And I like that you were working with, all the different spirits that you listed in there, which I think, I'm sorry, I just got distracted by a question, but yeah, I like that you're working with spirits that, a lot of them I hadn't heard of, or you're working with the plant spirits for like Amonita muscaria or the Datura one or Mandrake. I think that's something that's interesting to bring into your practice because, and I know for me, like I just kind of focus on the spirits that I work with, and sometimes I work with my spirit guides, and I've been doing a lot of work lately that was guided by the spirits I work with my higher self. So I'm a gigantic nerd, so I read a lot. So I on average read about 50 books a year. Huge nerd. So I have different kind of themes I maneuver through, and I'd gotten back into kind of revisiting, circling back a little bit to revisit some of like the poison path and things like that. So I really enjoyed it from that perspective, because I mean, I don't think people work nearly enough in discovering like the new spirits and stuff like that you have in here that you've been working with in your experiences. It makes me want to explore that more, because I had an experience earlier this year or maybe late last year. I'd have to consult my poorly non-chronological disaster of grimoires to remember. But like one of the things I encountered was a spirit called that I think she revealed herself to be called Metropolis. And it's like she's not from any pantheon or any particular practice, and that it was someone that she's not always active, but she seems to come around in like times of great change. And I think like the last point in time she had come around was around like the Industrial Revolution and that kind of area, which is, I think, like the Metropolis part, I think for me was kind of some sort of visual reference to the film Metropolis that came out like probably over 100 years ago at this point in time. It's a great film. I believe it's a silent film, but yeah. So looking at that perspective, that was the first time that outside of working with spirit guides and stuff, that something new had really revealed itself to me in that sense. So I like seeing how people use flying ointments and like because you go through your whole process in here, like of ritual baths, and like it's not just putting on an ointment and go. Like you've got a whole ritual process that you use for doing this type of work.
Yeah, because I feel like it should be a ritual, right? Because if people want to just use a flying ointment and trip out, they're going to be disappointed. Like you need to make it a ritual.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just like put an ointment on and expect to like trip out.
in the psychedelic medicine realm, we talk about a lot about set and setting. And I think what you talk about here in your ritual process really is focusing on that set and setting of doing, of working with all of these different, with flying ointments or whatever you're using, that you're not just, like I said, sitting down and putting it on. There's an intentionality, there's a purpose to it. You've started this whole process. And I think that is really enriching. And so going to the set and setting part of it, when you're doing psychedelics, whether you're doing like mushrooms or ketamine, they talk a lot about set and setting. Same thing applies to using ritual entheogens and stuff for consciousness expanding and spirituality. And that what do we mean by set and setting? Do I want to go out in the blazing sun and sit in a park and do nightshade based flying ointments? No. Why? Because they contain atropine. Atropine causes your pupils to dilate, which makes everything a lot brighter and colorful. It doesn't really cause visual hallucinations, but that bright sunlight has become obnoxiously bright really fast, because as your eyes dilate, because like if you've ever gone to the eye doctor and they've put the drops in your eyes, that's atropine. That comes from Belladonna, so your eyes will dilate. So that would not be the best setting for doing that. Maybe at nighttime under moonlight would be much better if you're going outdoors to experience these things. Now, for me, when it comes to my set and setting, I like a very comfortable environment. So there's a lot of pillows. There's a blanket in case I get cold or hot or cold or hot.
Well, and I talk about in the book too, like I've had people try to access witch flight, which is what we call it. We call it witch flight. We don't call it astral travel or astral projection, though I do believe it is the same thing. I do. I just like to use the term witch flight because it's more like tradition specific.
Yes. Yeah, it very much is.
You are not going to have a witch flight on a 30-minute lunch break in your car in a parking garage. Like, if you're trying to do this on your lunch break, maybe don't. Maybe wait until you have the time to give it the respect this deserves.
Yes. And it's, for me, again, with the setting, like I like a lot of like low lighting. Like I have a lot of those projectors that I'll use. Like I'll project like the sky on the ceiling, like
and incense colors. And candles and music and like it's a whole thing.
Yes, absolutely. Like since I have trouble meditating, a lot of times I have guided meditations, or if I'm working with a particular spirit, I'll put on an hour-long YouTube video that's of the demonic N, and I will, set up that experience. I'm not going to put on some flying ointments and sit there and watch Grey's Anatomy, because guess what's going to happen? I'll just binge watch Grey's Anatomy. Although I do, that's one of my guilty pleasures. I have developed my own form of personal divination by binge watching Grey's Anatomy for life advice.
We love it.
Hey, you got it. Work it however it works for you is good. So but yeah, I really enjoyed the way that you laid it out with the ritual and
all. Well, and I would love to ask you, like, as a fellow left-hand path witch, do you have any thoughts on how I talk about the devil in the book?
I'm not one of those hardcore people that's gonna be like, well, because some people get a little touchy about it. And if you want to see a great left-hand path debate, get like a bunch of non-theistic Satanists and a bunch of theistic Satanists.
Oh, yes.
Say, let's talk about Satan.
Though? Let's do that, actually. Let's make that happen.
Yes. There's so many different ways to look at it, and I find it all really fascinating with the concept of the devil. So,
what did you think about like the devil in black, the devil in gold, the devil in green, the devil in red?
I'm trying to think of a good way to put that. I would probably need to reference it a little bit more. Hey, guess what? I opened up to the exact page. So let's look at each one. Devil in gold comes in spring. Yeah, I mean, I could see that. Like that part to me feels more of like the solar energy of the devil, in that sense. Like with the springtime, looking at it in terms of, you know, the traditional wheel of the year thing of, you know, all the Sabbats and stuff like that. I feel like that would make sense. The devil in green, summertime. Yeah, I do like these concepts a lot. I would think that the devil in red makes sense contextually with it, you know, be more like blood and malefic arts and stuff like that, and the devil in black. Yeah, I think that's fascinating, kind of looking at it in ways of how you broke it down, almost that it fits in its own kind of way of whether you want to look at it in drawing the quarters and the directional and in an elemental sense, also kind of figuring it into sort of the major Sabbats at least, or seasons within the year. That I like the way that that's done. Like, I don't, you know, there's a lot of traditions, you know, when it comes to, especially in the traditional witchcraft of the witch's devil and stuff like that, which I almost feel is separate from, say, working with, you know, like working with Lucifer on the Luciferian type stuff, or you know, in the satanic context, whether you're non-theistic or theistic, because
see, I think that most like trad witches would see Lucifer as like the gold devil.
Okay,
in like his Roman pagan sense.
That makes
like,
sense. Yeah.
The Lord of illumination and light and prophecy. And I think that most trad witches would work with Satan through like the red devil, or like the king of hell, the father of demons, blasphemy, and subversion.
Yeah. See, I know it more from the left-hand path or Luciferian or satanic sort of lens in which or from the demonolatry perspective in which those spirits are worked. So that's kind of where I come at it. I have knowledge of traditional witchcraft. It's just not specifically my practice, although I'm sure I incorporate elements of that into my work. But yeah, like when it comes to the concept of the devil, whether it be Satan or whether it be Lucifer, like there's so many. What is Satan when it gets down to it? Well, you know, at the root level, Satan, it can be a title. It can just be adversary in that sense. Some people look at it solely as a title and don't, in a non-theistic way, and not as an entity attached to that. Now, if you're looking at it in the historical context through everything that was written through various holy books, looking at different cultural traditions and histories and all the different pantheons, you know, when it comes to the Satan-like figure, you know, is that Beelzebub? Is Satan Shamyaza? Is Satan Lucifer? Is Satan something completely different? Is it just a title? So there's a lot of different philosophies around that. And, you know, and then even within the fallen angel lore, within Lucifer and Samael, there's so many different perspectives for it that in that little microcosm niche universe, there's so many different interpretations of it. So, and you have the traditional witchcraft things that come from, you know, European folk magic, you know, all of the rituals of the witches flying to the Sabbat to sign their name in the book and kiss the devil on the bum, you know, it's you have a lot of sort of stories in that. You have other things from other, you know, the concept I think in Islam was Iblis, you know, all these different kind of devil entities that kind of overarch different pantheons, different books, grimoires, holy traditions, etc. Is there a way that you think it like how do you perceive it in that sense? Do you think it, the way you work with the devil figure in the different colors and stuff like that, like how would you see that as, I don't want to say maybe transferable, or how does that link to you? Like, how do you see that in the terms of the broader sort of Luciferian, satanic, in the left-hand path, how they work with those type of entities.
So, like, I think I'm like left-hand path leaning, but I feel like I really detail most of that, like in the book,
Okay.
from a traditional witch standpoint, working with the devil through gold, green, red, and black.
Yeah, I really, I mean, I think there's so many different ways that you can work with any of these entities, that and a lot of it is you're going to form your own relationship with them. And it can be very different because it's going to be very personal to you. Like the way I work with Lucifer might be very different than the way with other people work with Lucifer,
Yeah, and for us, Lucifer is like the gold devil.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Like I said, the light bringer, the morning star.
Yeah. Prophecy, divination,
Yes.
the springtime.
Mm-hmm. The whole Walpurgis Nacht kind of thing too. That'd be really nice. But yeah, it's I'm trying to think if there was anything else on that end. I think that I forgot what I was probably going to say. I'm going to minimize screens so I don't get distracted.
Well, let me ask you, is there anything in the book that you disagreed with?
Disagreed with. There was nothing that really struck me as like, what are you talking about here? Not for nothing, like because I have such a technical background and training, like I can be exceedingly critical, especially when there's formulations.
I appreciate that.
Because I'm always like, when people like, I mean, it's like little things that unless you're like trained as a aromatherapist, you're probably not going to necessarily know. But like a lot of times when people make bath salts, they just put the bath salts and like the essential oils together and call it a day. I'm like, it doesn't work that way. You need to put the essential oils in a carrier oil. So put it in like virgin extra virgin olive oil or jojoba oil or something like that. Because what will end up happening is you're kind of here's the science of it all. Essential oil. What's the second word there? Oil. What's in a bath? Water. Do oil and water mix? They do not on their own. However, if you add an excipient to it that, or something that will bond the two things together, that's how you do it. So sometimes I can be like critical of formulations. I'm like about stuff, but I didn't really see anything that I was like, oh dear God, don't do that. To the end of how you have people kind of on you about the Datura thing and whatnot. But I mean, for me, like a lot of it's just technical stuff that I do, like with having done training in how to make incense. Like a lot of people will create an incense that's just like the ground up herbs and they burn it that way, which is fine. But to make an actual traditional loose incense,
I mean, it's not really fine.
I mean, some people burn herbs as offerings, but it's traditionally, if you're making a loose incense blend, you need some water and a binding agent for it. And whatever it is about that binding agent, it changes what just smells like burning herbs into something magical because it binds any like essential oils or fragrance to it, and it blends it all through the incense blend evenly, which is really important.
I mean, we kind of follow like the flower method, like have like a fruit or a blossom, have like a leaf or a petal, have like an oil, have a wood, have a resin, like flower.
Okay, that makes sense. It's similar. It's a similar there's a similar methodology to how a lot of perfumes are constructed, because you kind of have top notes, middle notes, base notes.
Exactly.
So some of those are going to be like your citruses and things like mint are always going to be like in your top notes. And then you have your mid notes, which might be something like, I'm trying to think what the mid notes would be. I'm a base note kind of gal. I'm all about that base when it comes to aroma. So that's going to be your things like rose essential oil or jasmine or, nag champa, stuff that has that really deep resinous. And what that means when they talk about top, mid, and base is that the base note is what burns off last. So your top note, because in the longevity of a fragrance, is that, God, I'm a nerd, is that the top note is going to burn off much faster. So your lemon is only going to be part of that aroma for about 4 hours, say. Then your mid notes of all those mid-range kind of things that are in there, like, say, I think lavender might be a mid note, something like that, that has some weight to it, not as toppy as those top notes. That's going to kind of dissipate faster, but the burn off of it takes a little longer. Then your base notes are kind of what anchor down that smell. And those are going to be the last kind of the really deep residual notes that you have. So that can be transferable into anything. I think for me, that's something I don't even think about at this point when I'm making anything, because it's just kind of deeply ingrained into my little brain that goes and just makes things. But I really love all of the recipes that you have. I like the bath. I was curious because I think you did an unboxing video recently. You were talking about the black bath bomb that doesn't stain your tub, and
Yes,
I need that.
Joanna Lee's Bathology.
Okay, I'll definitely have to check that out, because I got one from Lush, and yeah, I'm like, it looked great. It made my bath like pure black,
but it stains your tub.
Yeah, especially because I sometimes use black lava salt in some of the blends I make, and yeah, that stuff will. You're going to need to clean your tub really well after that.
What was your favorite chapter?
What's that?
What was your favorite chapter?
I think the one that stuck out to me the most was on the shape-shifting stuff, because that was something I was kind of researching at the time more, so that I found really helpful. I just like other people's experiences with things. I think that's the best way to learn sometimes, is to see what your approach is to this, how you do these things, and what your experiences are like with them. And it's really, I mean, it is a true testament to your practice that and the work that you've done, how like I never thought of kind of categorizing the different worlds I travel to in their own way, and that you have these very specific realms you travel to. And I'm like, I should take note of that more, because sometimes I travel to very specific places, but I also I tend to use my own astral temple as my jumping off point when I do that kind of work. That sometimes I kind of manifest myself there and then go. Because it's always a place I know I can go to that
right.
Especially if you have trouble with meditating and astral travel and getting there, having that particular place that you can always use as a jumping off point is really helpful.
Yeah, it's like an Access Monday.
Yeah. And you can also draw other spirits in and other things to work there in your astral temple. I've done that plenty of times. I've, visited the realms of other, like Lilith's realm or Lucifer's realm and things like that. So I just hadn't really thought about like exploring further beyond the spirits I work with and my own kind of astral realm. So I think that's something that I need to get my brain around a little bit more, because it's sometimes, I don't know if you run into this too, like there's just sometimes where it feels like I'm just shooting blanks here at this point. Like I couldn't meditate my way out of a paper bag some days, or like it's not that you get energetically blocked. There's just sometimes you just from the mundane aspect can't really connect into that world as well as you normally would. So I have that happen sometimes. I'm like, it's normal. Sometimes that happens.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited about this. I want to, now that I'm a little more settled post move, might kind of poke around, give it a second read, because I did read it very fast. I think I read it in the course of like a day or two. Because sometimes when I get really into something, I'm like, I gotta finish reading this. So I really kind of want to explore some of the like recipes more, because there's some things I haven't really played around with. Like I like the fact you have a Sabbath bread recipe in here, and like tea cakes and teas and stuff like that.
Ooh, try the tea cake. It's so good.
Okay, yes. Now that I'm a person who bakes again, I might do that. I got into a lot of really bad habits since the 2020 thing, and pretty much was living on takeout. And like at my old house, my business really took over the entire house. So most of my kitchen was a workspace. So the last thing I wanted to do was cook or bake. So I just entirely, and a lot of my cooking and baking ware got converted into things I make other things with, and don't want to, cross-pollinate with food. Like I don't really want to use my crock pots that I use exclusively for making flying with to make a stew.
Well, and I would say like, so I'm working on doing an extended Liber Spirituals, like the Codex. Mm-hmm. We're working on like expanding that.
Oh, nice.
With more correspondences and more like UPG from like other witches.
Nice.
So at least my video will have like the link where like if you go to these realms or work with any of these 86 spirits, you can send your gnosis to my editor. Oh, nice. And maybe it'll make it in the book next year.
That's awesome.
And Jen, I would love a submission from you.
Perfect. I'd be more than happy
Not to like put you on the spot, but
yeah, because that was the next question I was going to ask. Like, if this is like, especially with the spirit work and stuff, not just the broad concept of witchflight, this was something like I wanted to pick up this book and path work it, like the way you would like the Goetia or something, to go visit all these realms and have try to connect with these spirits. I'm trying to recall, you have your methods in here, but what would be the best way for someone who just hasn't read the book yet, might be new to this? Like, how would they path work this to kind of connect with those realms and the different spirits in the codex?
Well, first, like, read the book, but also work on connecting to your fetch and mirror jumping. Mm-hmm. Like working with the Keekstone or the Black Mirror would be where I would start. And then also like check out like the otherworldly ritual and like make the relics and that, and rip open veils to the other world through that ritual.
That sounds amazing. And I'm going to add that to my big list of things to do, which I keep crossing things off the big list of things to do, and it never gets any shorter. But, it's a lot for me with having just recently moved, like completely upending my life, the past, almost 25 years of my life. And all those changes. I moved back to the area where my family lives and all of that. It's been a point of time for me where I get to like once again completely reinvent myself and my life, and I've been in a very lengthy and intense project, not only on the mundane, not only with my ketamine treatments and stuff, and my spiritual journey, to really reinvent myself and to look at all the different aspects of my life and go, okay, we need to work on that habit and change that for the better. So now I'm a person who bakes and goes to the gym. I don't have fingernails. So.
We'd love to see it. Look at the nails.
I would not be able to function with nails that long. I'd just be like, hi, I have nails. Everyone has to do something for me.
Do you see this gemstone?
I love it. I so envy that. I would mess them up in a day. I mean, like for what I do, like I've constantly got herbs and like if I like bit my nail, like half the time I'm like, oh God, what does that taste? Because it's like I've got some kind of like perfumey thing stuck under my nail. So, and with having to work with all types of salts and herbs and stuff, like I would ruin nails like in a day, if that, probably a couple hours.
Felt.
Especially
well, we're at about like an hour and 43 minutes, so like
good time.
I think we can wrap this up.
Nice.
Also, when we end this live, you and I will still be connected.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I would love to kiki with you.
Sure.
Off live if you have time.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So, thank you for this.
Thank you. I'm glad we finally were able to connect. We've been trying to do this for a couple months now. But, insert that whole moving thing.
Well, thank you for having me on your channel and for interviewing me about my book.
Sure. I feel like I'm one of those people, like, I'm always like, girl, get your ADHD and thing, prepare before you do a video instead of sitting down and being like, okay, I can just wing this. So, but yeah, I feel like we did a good, and the prompts and stuff, kind of helped me too, because unless I sit down and like underline things and put and put a whole bunch of notes in there, like I'm sometimes useless.
Also, we can do a live again too.
Yeah. I'm so hit or miss with things. I could just, Rain Man rattle off like a whole bunch of, random things. And then other times I'm like, these are words. They form a sentence. I have no idea what's going on. The joy of a neurospicy brain. But yeah, thank you so much. This has been great. Thank you everyone for watching. Don't forget to click like and subscribe to all our channels and whatnot. And I'll be sure to edit and put like links below to everything so you can find the book, Ambrosia's Book of Witchflight, Traveling to the Other World.
Yay.
I'll make sure I got that right. Awesome.
Okay. So I'm going to end this live, but we'll still be here. Okay. So until next time, for all of you in the audience, thank you so much for joining. And until next time, blessed be, and we will see you in hell.
Indeed.